Welcome to Lessons That Last, where a researcher and a teacher talk about what it means to make a lasting impact on students' lives. They unpack the stories former students shared about their memorable teachers and discuss how we can all make a greater impact on the people in our lives. Here's Julie and Laura.
Hello, and welcome back to the Lessons That Last podcast. I'm Julie Hassan, professor, educational researcher, author, resilience trainer, all the things. And with me is my all the things co-host,
Laura Estes Swilly. And I don't think I really am all the things. I'm a teacher, specifically a high school English teacher, and I'm a writer, and I'm really trying to be focused and productive right now. So I'm so glad that you're here with us. We want to invite you to just come and sit with us and maybe even bring a friend.
You can always sit with us. We're going to talk all things teaching today. And I love the story you picked for us today, Laura. This is one of my favorites. So I'm going to start out with this story in mind, asking you this question.
Okay.
Do you remember any high school classes that felt like a community to you?
Oh, high school. Not really. I feel like we had a Latin class that kind of felt like a community.
But that felt like a community because that particular teacher we had for Latin,
right?
She was a struggling teacher, and I think looking back now that we are adults and teachers, clearly going through some personal stuff.
Yes.
And struggled with classroom management, struggled instructionally. So I think part of that was you had a bunch of smart kids in Latin class and a teacher who wasn't necessarily competent. So the students sort of banded together.
We did. And that's what I was thinking.
Yes.
We were community, but our community did not include our teacher in that class.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of places where there was full community. I think my drama classes always felt like community. And then we had, at the time when we were in high school, everyone took that peer counseling class. And if you couldn't create community and peer counseling, then what are you doing? I mean, that's the whole idea. So there was community, but I don't remember feeling a lot of community in my other classes. So think back to our beloved Mrs. Barentine, sorry.
Right.
And we loved her so much, and we loved her class, but I don't even really remember that being a tight community. Do you?
Now, I had her for every history and social studies.
Oh.
Every year I had Miss Barentine, which is lucky for me because we've talked about her on the pod before. Yes. She was amazing. Senior year, I took 3, maybe 4 dual enrollment classes. And one of the classes I took was political science, which was hers. And it was a small class. I want to say there were 10 of us.
Nice.
I was the only one who identified as female in that class. Very smart boys, and Mrs. Barentine and me. And she put our desks in a circle.
Yes.
And much of that class, she, I think, tried to run as she would a seminar, like a college class. So it was a lot of just discussion about politics and policies and how we got to be where we were back then, which was 86, 87. It was a tight group because it was small and the same kinds of kids. And she so beautifully led it as a place where we could talk about hard things like politics. Yeah. Although I do remember at the end of the year, we used to get those, remember, Masters of the Medallion?
Yes.
And you would get different content areas would award one. So I got one for home economics because I took all the home economics classes, and I got labeled in my sweet beloved community as Betty Crocker. And that
is a misnomer.
Not only was it so factually incorrect, it was, a little dig from that otherwise tight community.
Yes. Well, I think when I'm thinking about our classes and our teachers who were so wonderful, we really had some strong, strong teachers. I think that community and the idea of building community was not a prevalent thing in that day. I think in the 80s, we were still doing a lot of sit and get. Every once in a while, you might have that really like avant-garde teacher who put you in groups or something like that. But we had rows in our classes, and we had, fill out this assignment, complete this, and turn it in. It wasn't as focused as it is on building community today. Yeah. Would that be accurate?
I think the Kagan structures had not quite come into fashion in teaching yet. We're almost there. We're getting close. But I don't remember think pair sharing. The kids who were in high school, like when my kids were in high school, and certainly now, are super familiar with all those different collaborative structures, which builds community. And I mean, social emotional learning and mental health and all of that was definitely not a focus in the 80s.
No, not at all. Maybe in the peer counseling class.
Perhaps. But I don't know about you, but I remember peer counseling sometimes as like a gossip fest. Because when you talked about issues, sometimes to me it felt like an airing of like the news and your grievances with your boyfriend or whatever. I have to say, I never talked in that class. I didn't talk a lot in any class. I think that one depended a lot on the teacher's skill. Yeah, and I'm not sure all those teachers who were sort of thrown into peer counseling.
They weren't prepared.
Background and skills to do that. Yeah. Thinking back.
I think it's one of the few classes where I didn't sit in a row. I also had a science class where we sat at tables, but that was more used punitively in a strange way. But we sat like all around this giant,
like the table of exile in the science class.
Now, if you remember who the science teacher was, you will believe that, Julie.
Yes,
he followed us from middle school, I believe sometimes only to torment us.
Yes, I had him for physics.
Yes, you did.
We will not name him to protect the not so innocent.
but really the tables were I believe often used punitively. So I tried to lay low in that class, which I wasn't a lay lower, but I did my best in that class because I didn't want to be thrown into a wolves table, which there were wolf tables. Mm-hmm. So that was an opportunity, I think, to build community because we were at those tables. They were like lab tables, even though we didn't do any labs. And then in the peer counseling, we were all around a long stretch of tables. So you could kind of see most people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of building community. And then you're right, in Latin, we had to, so we did. And most of us have been together for 2 years in that same course. And so then there was a ready-made community. But I don't remember a lot of that in high school.
High school is interesting to me because if I think about all the different classes we had, so we had 7 periods, and I think homeroom was one of them. So really probably 5 or 6 classes each semester times we were 10th, 11th, 12th grade because we were back in junior high times 18, maybe 20 classes. Most of them are sort of a blur.
Yeah.
I kind of remember, and I may remember the teacher's name, but I don't remember much. And then some of them I remember so clearly. Mr. Resinides, Honors English. I remember super clearly everything we read, where I sat, what that room looked like, what he said. There's something about that that's interesting to me. Like why some places feel like a blur and why classes like Mr. Resinides or Miss Barentine's are so clearly like still in my head.
I still feel that way about our sophomore English class with Miss Ignatic. And I think part of it was that we were together. So I'm heavily identifying sitting behind you in class with that class. And then of course, our whole lives since we were 15. We have reminded each other to beware the Ides of March, thanks to her performance of Julius Caesar. And so that stays, and that room stays because it's where she did that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot of missing pieces. I think the ones that stand out are the ones with really excellent teaching, or really not excellent teaching, or the ones where I was with someone where I was happy to be there.
Yeah. A little novelty, like Miss Ignatic was very different than any other teacher we ever had. Mm-hmm. So there was some novelty. You and I didn't have, I think that may be the only class we ever had together after 7th grade. I don't remember us in class together. So
we did have home ec together.
We did have home ec together. Hey, I mean, we didn't talk about that, but there is a sense of community in home ec because you're doing things together.
Yes.
You're either trying to sew a skirt or you're trying to cook something. And so, and you're doing things alongside people, which naturally you talk while you're doing things.
Right. And you help each other out, and then you know who you can count on. I think so. We didn't do that in high school, but I definitely did that with you in middle school or junior high, as we called it. But no, we didn't have a lot of, it's interesting. We didn't have a lot of classes together, but we had a lot of the same teachers. No, we had Barentine together our sophomore year. We had Miss Ignatic and Mrs. Barentine together.
We did. Mm-hmm. We had some friends, like some fun friends in that class, as I recall. I think Trevor Weeks.
Trevor was
class who always adds a little bit of fun and spice and sense of community. So I forgot about that one. So I love that you picked this story focused on community, and you really had me thinking about what I remember in terms of feeling like part of a community in high school.
I bet you feel more connected to community from your time on the dance team.
I think so, probably. And what's interesting maybe about some of the places we felt like a sense of community, like home ec, or Latin, there were clubs associated with that group of people. Mm-hmm. Like Latin, we had the club and we wore the togas. And
we had the parties. Yeah.
Most importantly, we may not have learned a lot of Latin.
No.
But we had some good parties.
We did. You're right. There were clubs associated, and that makes sense as to help build community because we were doing things outside of class together as well.
Yeah. So why did you pick Jase's story about Mr. Shipp?
I just loved this story for two reasons. One, anyone who's been listening to us and stuck with us knows I always go back to community and building community. It means so much to me. It makes my days better, and I know it makes the hour my kids spend with me better. To get some of that synergy going. And the way they leveraged it in this classroom is, I think, phenomenal. And then it reminded me too of all of the tumult in our society that surrounds politics. And we, of course, all have our own ideas, and we may not all be on the same side, but it does not have to be difficult or ugly as it so often has become. And that's kind of new in our society. And this story reminded me of the way it is supposed to be, and maybe the way it used to be, where we can respect each other's leadership, even if we don't agree with each other. So this one hit a chord for me, thinking about what we're heading into. And even already this early, my students are talking about it all the time. And it's not nice talking about it. It's never for one person. It's mostly anti another person.
Oh, yes. So would you, Laura, read Jase's story about Mr. Shipp for us?
Yes, I would love to. Mr. Shipp was my high school history teacher, and I remember his class feeling like a community. He always said we sink or sail together. Many of my classes seemed competitive, but there was a spirit of caring and helpfulness in Mr. Shipp's classroom. When Mr. Shipp heard I was running for class president, he made my campaign a collaborative activity. My classmates helped me create posters and flyers. They listened to my speech and gave feedback. When I won the election, it felt like a victory for all of us. I run my own company now, and I often think about the classroom culture Mr. Shipp created. I want my employees to feel that same sense of camaraderie and support. After all, in business and in life, we sink or sail together.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Shipp, sinking or sailing together. And
what a great lesson.
Shipp's class. Yes. So pull out for us, what about this speaks to community for you? What about this example?
I think, first of all, it's Mr. Shipp defining it for them. Us, including me, Mr. Shipp, sink or sail together. And so it's defined. That was set out, it sounds like, from the beginning. We're in this together. And because we're in this together, that means some things. We have to work together. We have to support each other. We have to care about each other's success. So I think that defining it from the beginning is great. I'm so jealous that his last name is Shipp and he had that perfect metaphor to go along with his name. I love it. So I think he just started from day one, and that really sticks out to me. I think a lot about community, not just in my classroom, but also within my school, and how we can build a better community, strengthen our community, care about each other with those bonds that are not worried about politics or sides, but just we are in this together idea. And then the thing that he did about bringing them all in on supporting one person, which probably felt a lot like favoritism for a minute. Like, is it appropriate to do this? Can we all go in together on this one kid? Am I saying the wrong thing? But really, it was such a life lesson that he was providing. It doesn't matter which kid it was. It was a kid running, and now we have to work together. And I think that he showed them something maybe they had never seen before, and that's amazing.
And I can't help but think that, okay, so this was Jase's story, and he was the one running. Mm-hmm. But as other kids had goals or things they were trying to accomplish, he surely encouraged supporting them. So I'm thinking if there was a kid in the class who was on the baseball team, maybe Mr. Shipp announces, hey, don't forget, this friend has a game tonight at 6. It's a home game. It's a big game. Tell us about the game. Like, let's all go sit together. I'm imagining that this wasn't the only incident where he pulled them together to try to help each other reach a goal.
I agree. And I loved that he gave this student his time. And he was a high school history teacher. And I know a lot of high school history teachers, and they are just crammed. Every minute of every day has a purpose and something they have to do to get across because of benchmarks and those things. And so facts and dates and the important, deep thinking about issues. When our class is shortened because of an assembly, they are stressed, right? So if they don't have 15 minutes to give up for an assembly, look at the time this history teacher gave up for this really important purpose, full of life lessons, but also deviating from the curriculum. And I think that says a lot about him as well.
And then I wonder, there's so many times when we pull these stories out and we wish we could ask questions to the teacher or the student, especially the teacher, if he tied some content to an election.
Yes, of course he did. He would not have done this if he couldn't connect it. That wouldn't make sense. And I think you're right. I'm sure he supported many, many kids in many different ways. But I think this was different because he's a history teacher. And so they probably talked about campaigning and maybe campaign issues from historical presidential campaigns. Giving the student time to practice his speech, what valuable time for Jase. That's amazing. And then I'm sure they were able to connect. Well, we've looked at other presidential speeches. We've looked at other important speeches in our history. How does this one compare? What feedback can we give him to do better? Because we are experts now on looking at those kinds of cases. It absolutely had to be connected.
And even an opportunity to explore what a privilege and responsibility the right to vote is.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Are we all going to vote in this student election? Yes, we are.
Right.
And we're going to do our due diligence and understand things about the candidates before we vote. And if there's a candidate who we do support, we're going to volunteer some of our time and talent to try to get that candidate elected. So there are so many powerful opportunities
Yes.
in this community building experience for kids in a history class.
And we talk a lot in education, I think, especially right now, about building that the citizenship. You are a citizen of the United States. What does that look like? What are the responsibilities and what are the rights that come with that? And that's exactly what you were just talking about, how to be an active citizen in your community.
And I am sure Mr. Shipp, with his clever name metaphors, talked a lot about citizenship.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. I love it.
I was thinking too, I've been talking and thinking and writing so much about teacher isolation and loneliness lately. And I had a grad student talk to me about that. And what we decided was, even though we're the only adult in the classroom, sometimes we're never the only teacher in the classroom, because sometimes we're the learner and sometimes our students are teachers. And just shifting that in my head almost made me feel like our class was more a community and I was less a only one, in a role. Yeah. And that we are all together learners and teachers and trying to help each other figure all this out.
I agree. I love the teachable moment, and it comes in many forms. And sometimes the teachable moment is you are teaching me something because I've never heard this before. Mm-hmm. And I will take that teachable moment because, one, I want to learn. If it's important to my student, I want to know. But two, now you feel so valued and respected because I've given the reins to you to teach us something. And I think that builds community in a really strong way, because there isn't one person who always has the microphone, let's say, or the talking shell. We can pass the conch around, and lots of people have an opportunity to say the things and teach the things and enrich us as we all grow together.
And even in decision making, if I, as the teacher, am not the sole decision maker, yes, this is not a democracy, by nature, but if it is maybe not quite a kingdom, if it's somewhere in between, where at least they feel some power and control, that I think goes a long way toward
I love to be able to say, and of course, just in a lot of communicating and giving those choices is a lot like parenting, where you choose the things that it's okay with you if it goes either way, or you give them two choices that you're fine with. So I love to be able to negotiate due dates, not at the end when they want more time, but at the beginning. So I'm thinking about this. I want you to have enough time. Here's a possible due date. Here's another possible due date. And here's how I feel about the two. What do you guys think? And I think they feel empowered by being able to tell me what they think about the due dates and why one is better than the other. And then in the end, we come to an agreement. And because I don't care between the two, I'm happy to choose the one they prefer.
I love that. So what else do you do really intentionally to try to build a sense of community?
I think I start on the first day, or maybe even before the first day. Before the first day, I start with how I arrange my room. My room is almost like an amphitheater. I think that's the structure. So it's 3-sided, because I don't want anyone to have their back to the whiteboard, or we just got new smart boards. Julie, I'm trying to learn how to use a smart board now. Now, like all of a sudden. So you don't want to have your back to the smart board or to the whiteboard, but so it's 3-sided, and none of the rows are deeper than 3. So I have a 3-sided room with very short rows that don't really feel like rows because there's only 3. And so we intentionally talk about how this room was designed and why it was designed that way. And they understand this room signals to me that I'm going to be working with everyone. I need to be able to see everyone and communicate with everyone. And so to me, that starts before they ever walk in.
Yeah. It's not the church room where we all try to race to the back.
Yes.
Back seat.
Yeah, exactly. And there really is no back. You can't,
Right.
I mean, I think some of them come in and race to the back. But then they find out, oh, this really isn't very far back.
I've been thinking about this too. When I came to Appalachian State, because of the location, it takes everybody outside of Boone a long time to get here. It's not logistically great to offer grad classes on campus in the evenings because students would be traveling so far. So our evening classes are all remote via Zoom. And I come from teaching a full day Saturday on campus face-to-face class where you couldn't help but be
right. Yes.
By the time you spent all day on all of these Saturdays together. And I kept thinking, how am I going to make this feel, I mean, selfishly for me, like I know them and this is a community. And I'm surprised at the trade-offs. So I'm teaching a grad class now, and one of my students, Paula, has a 9-week-old bulldog puppy named Kevin.
Oh, Kevin.
Kevin wears a little red sweater, and Kevin is always on her lap because he gets a little whiny in the evenings.
Yes.
And I get a little distracted by Kevin, but I think I wouldn't see Kevin, or, sometimes the mamas or the daddies have a newborn in a bottle while we're in class, and you see different things about them. They
That's
really
nice.
become full people with full lives.
Mm-hmm.
But it also takes some effort to get to know each other a little deeper.
Right.
I put them at the beginning of every class for a couple minutes in pairs. And we used to do, I can't remember what we called it, a Venn check-in. So it was a Venn diagram. And it was what's just about you and just about me, and then what do we have in common? And I had 2 who discovered they were second cousins.
I love that.
You just never know.
I love that.
But it takes not a lot of effort, but a lot of intention, whether
Yes.
you're face-to-face in a room with students or via Zoom or whatever arrangement. You have to make that an intention a priority.
Yes. And so I think we talked about on our first episode of this season, my choose one word. And even that is about community. We had to build community before we could proclaim our one words to each other and put them on the bulletin board. But we're building a deeper community by sharing that. And we have a community where someone will walk in and point to someone else's word on the board now. Oh, look, hey, don't forget. Friends caring about friends. We also write a lot, of course. So it's an English class. And when I have them do poetry, which is regular, I always give them a chance to read it. And that's a hard thing, very hard to share your own poetry. And when they do, everyone is astounded by how wonderful it is. There's just a lot of love to the poet because they know they don't want to share theirs. They're afraid. And so we really honor the people who are not afraid. So it's constant. I think that's a problem. Sometimes we think I will build community and then this will run smoothly, but I will build community and then continue building it until the day I say goodbye to them.
Yeah. And beyond, probably. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm certain they stay connected. Like,
oh yeah.
Some of us from Latin class.
We're exactly
friends. Oh, I love that you picked this story today. It's made me think about our community on the Lessons That Last podcast and this community of teachers, because we can feel really lonely and isolated as educators.
Yes.
But there are millions of us around the world, and we have this special bond because no one but us really understand.
That's true. No teacher is a stranger to another teacher.
No. So, friends, thank you for tuning in, for helping us build this sense of community on the Lessons That Last podcast. If you loved Jase's story and you're reading along at home, you can find this story in the Lessons That Last book. It is lesson 20 called Building Together.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for spending a little bit of time with us today.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you will subscribe to the Lessons That Last podcast wherever you listen. Give us a rating, too, which will help other listeners find us. And don't forget to visit chalkandchances.com for more stories. You can also find more information on Julie's research in books. While you're there, take the quiz to find out what kind of memorable teacher you are. I took it and was surprised by what I found. I think you'll find good food for thought. Let us know about your quiz results. We hope you will meet us here each week and bring a friend to share the conversation.